Hello, my name is Eleni Suarez.
And I am Paulette Vasquez, and we are going to present our last assignment, which is called Text Types, Functions, and Structures. The objective of this assignment is to analyze two different text genres to evidence students' knowledge of text types, scaffolding, syntactical features, recurrence rules, progression patterns, and connectivity, expressed in EFL at B2 C1 level using ICT resources.
We are going to start by analyzing Little Elephant. Pause the video if you want to read the text first. This text is a short story, which belongs to the narrative genre, because it tells a sequence of events, which in this case are fictional. Also, there is a third-person narrator, who is omniscient, because he knows the feelings of the characters. For instance, that the character got scared, or that he saw something. Now we analyze the scaffolding of the text. In pink, we have the orientation, that tells who is in the story, when, where, and what is going on. The complication in green is an event that starts a chain of events. In this text, for example, the complication is the starting of the fire. Next, the sequence of events in yellow tell what is happening in the story. In blue, there is the resolution of the complication. In this text would be when the elephants extinguish the fire. And finally, in red, there is a moral message to be learned from the story, which name is coda. In this text is to accept your characteristics because they make you special. Now, in terms of grammatical features, we have in green the nouns that mainly identify the characters and place of the story. The adjectives in red to describe the characters and settings, the dynamic verbs in yellow to show the actions performed by the characters, and finally, in purple, there are adverbs, adverbials, and adverb clauses that connect the events. Now we are going to analyze the recurrence rules, that is, how elements are repeated in the text. The first recurrence rule present in the text is anaphoric procedures, specifically pronominalization, and more specifically, anaphoric reference, because first it is mentioned the antecedent, and then it is mentioned the pronoun. For example, Little Elephant Taro then is mentioned as the pronoun he. Then noise is mentioned as the pronoun it. And finally, the concept of animals is mentioned in the text as the pronoun they. The second recurrence rule present in the text is repetition, and here the same concept is repeated in the text with the same word. For example, taro is repeated again as taro. Most common in the text is the example of the pronoun he, which is repeated again in the following sentence as he. The third recurrence rule present in the text is referential verbs, which belongs to anaphoric procedures. In the text, for example, was praying is mentioned again, but without repeating the same verb. Here is mentioned as doing so. In other words, in order to avoid repetition in saying he also started to spray a huge amount of water from his big nose, doing so is the referential verb which refers to the predicate previously mentioned. The following aspect to analyze is the progression pattern of this text, that is, how the information is presented in the text. But first, we must know that the theme is the subject of a sentence, and the rime is what is being said about the subject, so basically the predicate. Now we are ready to analyze this in detail. In this text, the most frequent progression pattern is constant thematic progression, because the theme of the first clause becomes the theme of the following clauses, and the rimes provide new information about the same theme. In the story, for instance, the most frequent theme is the elephant taro, which is the subject in most of the sentences. But obviously the rimes change, because they provide new information as the story goes on. Let me exemplify the most frequent connections that link ideas in this text. First, there are explicit connections represented by punctuation marks. In the case of the story, they are represented by periods. On the second place, there are implicit connections represented by subordinators such as because, when, and that. Moreover, there are coordinators such as also, as well as and.
Moving on to the second text, which is an excerpt from the novel Strange Beasts of China by Yang Qi. You can pause the video if you want to read it first. The genre of this text is descriptive, and its function is to describe a place and the people who live there. Next, we are going to identify the scaffolding, which means how the text is constructed. In pink, we see the first part. For descriptive texts, the first part should be a general opening statement in the first paragraph, which introduces the subject of the description and can give details about when, where, who, or what of the subject. Then, in yellow, we find a series of paragraphs about the subject, each one usually starting with a topic sentence, which previews the details that will be contained later on the paragraph. Finally, in blue, we see the concluding paragraph, which signals the end of the text. In the next part, we are going to identify some grammatical features of a descriptive text. These type of texts are characterized by the use of linking verbs, like the verb to be, go, have, among others. These will be highlighted in orange. Another characteristic feature is the use of adjectives to describe the places, things, and people in the text. These will be highlighted with purple. One final grammatical feature is the use of mostly the simple present tense, which we are able to identify by looking at the conjugated verb of each sentence. Here are some examples marked with red. Now we are going to identify some recurrence rules on the text. These recurrence rules will be pronominalization, referential verbs, and deletion. Pronominalization. Of the two types, anaphoric and cataphoric reference, this one is anaphoric, which means that the pronoun they is used to refer to an antecedent previously mentioned, which is sorrowful beasts. Referential verbs are the ones that anaphorically refer to mentioned predicates. In this example, do refers to never smile. Elision is the elimination of subjects when it has been mentioned more than once. Here, instead of saying sorrowful beasts again, we eliminate it. The most frequent progression pattern is constant thematic progression, because the theme of the first clause becomes the theme of the clauses that follow. Moreover, the item of the theme of the first clause is also selected as the theme of the following clauses. And finally, because the theme is always the same. Lastly, the most frequent connections are implicit connections, which are punctuation marks, because there are 32 of them. On the contrary, there are 13 explicit connections, or connectors, which show explicit relations between sentences or sequence of sentences in a text.
And that is all for our assignment. Thank you for your attention.